Hi, welcome to Tales from the Sky Lounge. It's a podcast about business, consulting, and venture investing. We get out there in the world and we talk to people who are making it happen and get their stories. Today's guest in the Sky Lounge, Chris Caparon. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the Sky
Hey,
Lounge.
Todd. Thank
Good
you.
to see you
Thanks for
again.
having me.
Yeah. Chris, why don't you give us a little background? Who are you and what's your history?
Well, it's a long question, or kind of an origin story here. I actually grew up in Michigan, born, bred, raised, lifelong fan. Went to the school, uh, got two engineering degrees, and the first thing I realized is I didn't want to be an engineer in Michigan, certainly. And so, before the ink was dry on my diploma, I had moved to California and started my career out here. California is just a great incubator, where I say dreams come true, but really where you can do anything you want to do and what you're interested in, and that defined my journey. Worked in multiple different industries, but it was really an entrepreneur at heart. And there came a point at which I wanted to get into technology and leverage my background. I got into ERP and enterprise consulting. And I spent about 7, 8 years doing that on the run up to Y2K and learned a huge amount. Learned how enterprises work, learned how the technology enables the enterprise and vice versa, and where the gaps were in the software. At that point, I admit my future and current and I guess past business partner, and we decided to start a software company. And so out here in Southern California, we started CForia Software right after Y2K in 2001 and ran that organization for 20 plus years. And
Wow.
then ultimately sold it to a private equity company. And that's obviously, Todd, where you and I met.
Congrats. Yeah, that's a heck of a run. And then so your founder, I don't know if you want to name names, but Dave.
Sure. Yeah, Dave, for sure.
so
Yeah,
so
no, for Dave, for sure.
yeah, he's a great guy, and I love y'all's energy and just your culture. You've created a really neat little company, not a little company, but a very significant company out in just gorgeous Westlake Village in California. Tell us, it's always fascinating. I'm an entrepreneur at heart as well. The napkin story, like how did you and Dave meet? And then, at what point did you decide, there's a business here, we should go figure this out?
It's a great question. It's an interesting story because I think it's relevant to anyone listening here. Is when you decide, and people have asked me, what does it take to start a company? How did you do
Mhm.
it? Uh, and what did that look like? And Dave and I met during my run managing a this consulting company, and I was implementing software. He was working for a third-party bolt-on software company, making products that added onto that ERP, which happened to be a mainframe product called Mapix at that time.
Mhm.
And Dave was marketing a product that his company was creating, and we got together. And then post Y2K, he and I continued talking, and we said, "Well, what do we want to do? Right? We want to work together. What does that look like?" And I'm I like to call myself a recovering engineer. I'm a recovering engineer that got into or engineer that got into software and sales. And sales is really what I have at my heart. And when I say sales and software, that's not just selling software, but that's understanding what role that software has in a business and the impact that it can make in that business, and then using that tool with a customer in a consultative way to deliver the outcome they want. Right. So as a sales guy, can you sell it? So we said, well, if you look at the life cycle of an enterprise software process, you have a lot of departments. The more departments, the more complex. We thought initially, why don't we sell it to one department, and who signs every deal? Well, that would be the treasurer CFO.
Mhm.
Well, okay, so if the treasurer CFO is going to buy something, what does he want to buy? Right? Well, you have AR software, you have AP software, and you have reporting software. To me, reporting software was a cook space. AP software, I do not want to sell to buyers. That's just not a journey that I wanted to go down. And so we decided, literally in the course of an hour, that accounts receivable automation is an area that we should focus on. And we did a lot of research at that time, and there's only one competitor in the space. And it seemed like it was a great opportunity for us to build a product that would add, immediate value to a company and focus on that. And we literally started on a flip chart in October of 2000 and started writing code and had our first customer about 7 months later.
Wow, that's so awesome. So you just kind of cleaned up on all these ERP implementations, and then presumably you knew a bunch of people in space and said, "Hey, let us help you clean up your AR and time to cash." And then,
true story. The early days of the entrepreneurial world are just the hardest. I'm not saying others aren't hard, but the decision that you make when you jump off the cliff, you don't know if there's going to be you jump off the high dive and you don't know if there's going to be water in the pool, right, when you land. So August 15th sticks in my mind because that was a day, that was the last paycheck that I received from industry. And from that point on, I was funding through the work that I did at CForia. So to your point, Todd, I started calling the A's in my database, getting people to buy my software. And it was sort of Outlook on steroids. And that's kind of how the functionality was, in a way I went. About 4 weeks later, the internet was really wonky. My business partner, Dave, was down in Orlando, and I called him. He was at a conference, and he said, "You don't know what's going on?" And I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "People are flying planes into buildings. You should go into the house, turn on the TV, and hug your wife." And it was 9/11, and my wife, and obviously it's a very emotional time. And so having no paycheck, having two kids in diapers, it was just a low point. And the question became, what are you going to do about it? And so that weekend, we decided just to head out for the weekend and clear our heads. And then come Monday, we actually had a customer running our software, and I called them and, "Hey, what's going on?" It's an emotional time. And they said, "Hey, I got a problem. It's not real big." And I'm like, "Okay, let me call Dave." And I spoke with Dave, and all the airports are shut down. He's in Orlando. We live in Westlake Village, California. And he said, "Hey, how am I going to get home?" And I said, take I-75 north, rent a car, take the 10 west, and then when you go into the tunnel in Santa Monica, turn right on Pacific Coast Highway."
Wow.
And that's what he did. He took off. And so working with that customer, I called Dave back, I don't know, 12 hours later. I can't remember. And he was somewhere in like Montgomery, Alabama, somewhere.
Jeez.
And I said, "Hey, they got a problem. They're down." And he said, let me fix this. Now, this is 2001. They don't have the internet. Not really. You need a modem. And so he stopped off at a McDonald's, and Dave's a very affable, nice guy. And he talked to the manager at the McDonald's, and he said, "Can I borrow the modem in your office?" And he did a tech support call from a McDonald's in Montgomery, Alabama, to solve this customer's problem and make sure that they're not down. And when you do things like that, it speaks for you as a company, as a person. It speaks to the time and the camaraderie that was out there on the road with all those road warriors. But you have a customer for life when you do things like that. And that informed really the esprit de corps that we had as a company, throughout our life cycle.
Wow, what an amazing story.
The key to this, Todd, was that every single version of the software that we built added value to the software, added value to the customer, added value to the sale price of the software. And that cadence really drove our development for a number of years. And so we had the cadence of delivery right in line with what we could do. And then we started with cash flow, started hiring employees. So it was very organic. It was very customer centric, and value was delivered at every step along the way. So it's a very symbiotic relationship with our customers.
Yeah. People talk about shippable value and why that's a big deal. It sounds like you guys just innately understood, hey, if we deliver something, there's got to be value here, and I have to be able to express that to a customer, have the customer say, "Yes, I will pay for that."
Well, the interesting thing about that marketplace at that time is there was one main competitor and several other ancillary competitors, but a lot of it's evangelical sales, right? Mm-hmm. So when you sell something, what's the value that's delivered? And in our world, we want it to be a hard dollar ROI, and we wanted to minimize the IT resources. We wanted to shorten the value to time to ROI, and and have that as sort of our corporate North Star in terms of our product value. And so as a company, that credo continued on through the life cycle of our company,
Mhm.
is just continuing with that idea that the customer wants to see value in the software. They want to minimize risk. And we just continue adding functionality into that funnel. And that was always instructive into every development and design decision that we made.
Sounds like you guys had a really great relationship where you went out and you talked to people and you got it, and your computer science background helps translate it into requirements, and then Dave could just build whatever you need to get built, and then you both had a lane, and then just kind of iterated relentlessly at what's going to move the needle for our customers, right?
Yeah, and I think when you look at a software company, and I'll say use CForia as an example, but I think this is instructive as I talk to other entrepreneurs and other owners of software companies, is who's the tip of the spear in the organization? And say, as I like to say, sales cures everything. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't, right?
Right.
It's got to be instructive sales. It's got to be moving the organization in alignment with a goal and objective. And in our case, you're right. Being able to be on that tip of the spear, being able to filter out what the customer really needs versus something that is ancillary, and something where if this customer needs it, is it a global requirement? And if it's a global requirement that everyone can harvest, and it's really worth putting some energy into. And in a space back then in AR automation, where you're really defining what functionality customers really want. A lot of times that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Customers don't know what they need until you give it to them, and then they're excited about it. And we had that relationship when we would be discussing new features. Does it make sense? What's the value? Is it something that every customer would add value? And that allows you to build deep, long-term relationships with customers who continually get value from their initial investment. And that's the right relationship between a vendor and a customer, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then that second, third, fourth, fifth time you knock on their door and say, "Hey, we got something new," it gets easier and easier and easier to the point where they're thinking, "Hey, why didn't you call earlier? We could really use all this stuff."
Yeah, absolutely. And you can have great ideas, but you also have to look at how we were funded. We were an internally funded company. Everything was based off of cash flows. So the decisions that we made were predicated upon not just short-term, there was long-term goals and objectives, but it wasn't pie in the sky. It was very practical. And it was easier to do in a space where we're defining the function that the customer needs, right?
Mhm.
We're not trying to build a Me Too product. Although we had competitors, each competitor had particular value. And so that, once again, just allowed us to be very both tactical and strategic in terms of what we did, and never made a mistake, which is also very
I'm
easy.
sure. Never. It's like
Never.
my grandpa was a lawyer. He never lost a case, right?
Yeah.
We talk in B2B SaaS. That's like the cool thing everybody wants to be in. Your customer list, without naming names unless you want to, is a who's who. I mean, immediately recognizable names of very big, multi-continent, meaningful, valuable brands. So how did you? What do you attribute that to, or how did you get there? 20 years is a long time, but man, those companies are who's who of companies that have been there, done that.
Well, as I like to say, our NASCAR slide is, to your point, is highly recognizable. And really our focus when we talk about why do people buy software, well, let's start at this, Todd. This is a foundational question that I ask every sales rep when I interview them, and I'll come back to answering your question.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, why do people buy software, right? And the first answer from the salesperson generally is, well, it's good for the company. And I'll give that top three, 100%. That's top three, but that to me is not one of the top two reasons why someone will stick their head out in an enterprise and buy software. Then they'll say, well, it's good for their department. And I agree with that. I think that's number two on my list. I think it's good for their employees. They see the pain, they see the hours, and they want to find some way to automate it. But the number one reason why people buy software is it's good for them. It gives them max bonus. It gives them a bump in their journey as a as a software buyer, right? And as a business professional, they want to be successful in their own lives and get and be able to move that on in their career. And so when we look at our customer base and we look at accounts receivable, and the elevator pitch on this is very simple. Accounts receivables, top two asset on a company's balance sheet. Typically, you have inventory if you're a manufacturer distributor, or you have accounts receivable. How do you manage that asset today? And every day that you can take out of, or increase the turns on that money has demonstrative value and that you release in working capital. And because it's such an enormous asset, the hard dollar return on investment is enormous in these projects. Well, I'm an engineer. You take out your calculator and you say, well, the bigger companies have the biggest ROI. Mm-hmm. And so we tended to punch up as a software company. So even as we closed one of the largest distributors of auto parts, I'll just say that, in the world out of my garage.
Wow.
In the early going. And the point I'm making with that is that the ROI is so compelling. How do we deleverage the risk, right? Well, why would I buy from a small company? And I said, well, if I give you the ROI inside of 6 months, and then you get to harvest it because it's a reoccurring return on investment. Once you improve the performance of your accounts receivable, it's a year-over-year annuity. What's there to lose, right?
Yeah.
And so by having an integration strategy tied into the sales strategy, tied into the return on investment, you really are kind of ticking off all these barriers to sales, right? Then at the end of the day, it allows us to scale into the very largest of companies. And when you do that, a global multinational. So what did CForia look like when we sold it? Well, we were about a 40-person company. We had 160 plus companies operating in over 110 countries. Mm-hmm. So large companies all over the world with users and customers, and very complex business problems that we were solving. And we were, if you were to add up the global turnover or the global sales and accounts receivable that we were managing, it was almost $500 billion. And so the net value of the product in those environments, in those companies, was gigantic. And so we just had very low turnover and very sticky and added a lot of value for a long time.
Yeah. Do you, so many questions. So do you think about, any heuristic, like if you got a new product and you could sell, save or demonstrate an ROI to a company, what percentage of that can you charge, or how do you price brand new software? Is there a ratio you like to think about, or is it, if it's just freaking huge, it's easy?
Well, back then it was, here's you want an interesting story on how you kind of demonstrate what is software worth, right? Well, it's worth the value that it delivers to a company ultimately. And we're working with a company that was spending about $100,000 a year on solving this problem. And I went into the treasurer and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you two options. I'll either charge you $100,000 a year and then you would just adopt my software, or I'll charge you nothing and I'll charge you 30% of the savings, whatever it is, over what you have today. So you're paying nothing. And if my software works, you're just going to pay me 30 cents on the dollar. And if you worked out the math, it would work out to about $500,000 a year. And he said no to both. And I said, you can't do that, right? Either I'm adding value over here, or it costs you nothing and there's no risk. Now, why wouldn't you take the no risk option? He said, because I think you're right. I think you're going to deliver that value.
And I'm cheap.
And I'm cheap.
Yeah.
And so you run into that, right? You run into,
sure,
these numbers are ridiculous. I don't have that. I don't want to end up spending that much money, even though your math is 100% accurate.
Yeah. So do you feel like there's a line somewhere, people talk about, 10% is a no-brainer. If I can, charge you 10% of what I save you, 20% is a reasonable number. It sounded like 30%, you start to get into the lizard brain, that's too much money argument. You feel like it depends on who you're selling to, who the personality is across the table. Do you have any experiences with setting prices?
When I first started selling enterprise software, the person that I worked for, the term he used is a walletectomy, right? What will they pay? Well, the software is worth something. When my wife and I were driving around looking for homes in Westlake Village, right after we started the company, I said, we're going to get an office and we're going to move the family. And I was on a conference call, two different calls, right? One that I was charging X for, the next thing I was charging like 10X for. And she said, let me get this straight. I'm just listening to you sell the software at two different values. And I said, yes. She said, same software. I said, same software. She goes, that's illegal? And I said, yes, it is legal. Because what's the value worth? And Todd, if I had that magic crystal ball, I'd love to know what that is, right? It's a combination of things. The culture of the company, how they view money and technology. Do they invest? How will they adopt it? Risk mitigation is a big part of that because nobody, getting back to why do people buy software? They don't want to fail a project, right? They want to be heroes. They want to be successful. And so it's really a dance between making sure that your customer and company is successful and that your business is successful and growing. And it's very much a symbiotic relationship, right? If you're out of balance and there's a power imbalance, you're charging too much, then they're going to churn you and you're going to lose that customer. If you're undercharging, then that's just an unhealthy relationship. So it is definitely a balance. And I don't have a set formula.
And you mentioned risk, and churn, like if people think that you're sketchy and are going to let them down or fail or make a mistake, that's a big problem. I mean, that's also another side to this coin, right? Just because you're saving them a lot of money doesn't mean they're always going to buy from you if they think that something bad's about to happen to them personally in the business. Nobody ever
100%.
got fired for buying IBM, right?
100%. And at the end of the day, when someone has the courage to put their head above the corporate parapet, so to speak, the term that you'll hear oftentimes in enterprise sales is, sieging the castle. And when your champion raises their head up and they say, yes, I'm going to take you into the boardroom and I'm going to pitch this project, I think that that's a very important moment in the relationship between you and that customer. And so you have the initial relationship, and then over a period of time, you have to resell yourself. You have to validate and prove every day that you were the right selection. And when you lose sight of that, that's when the phone rings and they start hearing from your competitor. And so that's part of the credo that we had as a company, is making sure that we're adding value every day to a customer. And what does that look like? It could be a myriad of different things, not just feature function. Solving problems manifests itself, as you know, in many different ways. And just building a support organization that cares about the customer, that the North Star of the business is the customer and their satisfaction. And if you do those things, you're going to be a sticky software company.
Let's talk about technology evolution. When you started, you mentioned mainframe or AS400, right?
Yeah.
As a piece of it. And, that's where the big companies were in circa Y2K, just because you had to have a bigger computer to run more numbers through. So obviously toward the end, mainframes aren't really a thing anymore. How and when did you decide to evolve? What did that look like? Did Dave come and say, hey, I think we gotta, get on this new platform? And then at what point do you decide to invest in a major technological leap like that?
Boy, what a great question, Todd. Let me frame it this way. When we decided to go into this marketplace that had one intracted competitor, that competitor had been in business for quite some time. They had a full function suite. They had successful customers, and they were adding value to their customers, right? When we're going into a competitive situation, we needed to have something that added value in a different way, not just on feature function. In our world, that superpower was integration, where I could have limited IT support and have anyone install the software. I'm going to say anyone, just some software operator install the software and then be able to demo it back to the customer with their data. That had value outside of just the feature function. Remember, the return on investment on these projects was massive. So deleveraging the IT risk and solving that problem had value, and we grew the business that way. Well, the good news is you can grow the business that way. The bad news, there's a ceiling on that growth because not everybody runs that software. To your point, as companies get bigger, they start running other software. or
Mhm.
multiple. They grow through M&A, so they have multiple systems. And so the idea that we would migrate from an ERP specific software product to a multi ERP product, meaning we can take data from multiple systems simultaneously and present that as if the company was running on one system. And that journey, technologically, we use SQL Server.
Okay.
Is back then that was our integration model and our database model, and it worked. It worked well. Big project, big painful learning curve. Had to bring on new resources, had to learn new resources and new skills, and had to reinvent a lot of the technology that we were using as a company.
Mhm.
But we were able to do it incrementally within the constraints of a cash-based company, and begin to write business right about 5 years after product launch. So, well, our initial product launch was in 2001. And then let's say 2006 to 2007 is when we came out with this next iteration. From that moment, it was a fat client because that's all that was there. And then you have the idea of going to a cloud. So we needed a cloud-based client. And so we went through an entire re-platforming of that technology right around 2016 and came out with a cloud-based product. And just to give you a sense for what we accomplished, when we went live, our customer, had users in 30 countries. And so our first customer that went live on our software, on our re-platform cloud product, was in 30 countries. And
Wow.
so all the
No pressure.
complexities associated with that, which are a myriad, right?
Mhm.
We were able to land the plane
Yeah.
and add value to that customer.
What I keep hearing from you is relentless appreciation for the customer pain points. You talk about when they do M&A, they've got multiple ERPs. Hey, that's something we have to pull in and make it easier for the client. What is the client going through and being responsive to the client? It seems like that's a huge part of your story and what the success was. Being where the client is, understanding how their business runs, and then what do they need to be successful, and giving it to them.
100%. And I think if you take a step back, as I take a step back, having sold the business and had time to reflect on it, and
Mm-hmm.
time to speak with other companies and peer companies, and there's different ways you approach product development, right? There's different ways to think about it, product management, and what does that look like? In my experience, having a relentless focus on the customer, what they needed, and as I said, many times I didn't know what they needed, but when you hear the business problem, you hear what they're trying to solve, you realize that in order to solve it, you're going to deliver something that they haven't asked for, but it's swinging the hammer on the nail in the right way to solve their problem. And that right there, I think, is the critical secret sauce for our company, was making sure that we delivered that value. In a more mature industry, right, where you have a product manager a bit more disconnected from the customer, liaison between sales and a liaison to development, and trying to bring all those things together. That's a different model, and it's a critical one in large software companies. But I think that in my experience, that person is such a vital link in the success of the company, because what you build and what you deliver to the customers and what you can give salespeople to sell and what the support people have to support it, that whole relationship is vital. And in CForia's case, I filled that role throughout my tenure at CForia, and had obviously other people working with the customers, and became very collaborative. But at the end of the day, the customer needs to have value added to them, and if you continue to do that, you're going to be successful.
Let's talk about something a little different. You mentioned you got started and 9/11 happens, right? And then you get to the point where you're just launching your next round of interesting software in 2007. You said just in time for the 2008 banking crisis. Which I imagine
Thank you for
like,
that.
probably a little bit of impact, right? And then there's probably a couple other financial ups and downs. You have seen some cycles and probably have a
Yeah.
few stories to tell, and then including the great one in 2019, where you've had to, even evaluate whether you want to have an office or not, So how do you, you know, what advice would you give, when to the next generation when they're struggling with economic cycles or challenges? How do you, as an experienced, successful entrepreneur, think about, those kinds of crises, and how do you see them coming? And then, what's the first thing you do when like a 9/11 happens? You call somebody, I guess you went camping, plug in with your family. What are the big, if something like a meteor, like one of these solar flares takes out the internet tomorrow, or, what do you do? Right. Or what does the next generation do?
Well, it's really interesting because in 9/11, right, you have somebody who has one customer, right, and needed to clear the headgear. As an entrepreneur, right, part of being an entrepreneur is knowing that there's a cliff there, there's an abyss, it's there, and that's the fear that every entrepreneur has. End of day, that's there, and you can't ignore it. In fact, I don't know any entrepreneur that doesn't. I think it's very important to learn how to manage that and manage how to live in a world where, in the worst case scenario, you run out of money, right? I never missed a payroll in the entire history of our company. And part of that was making really, really good, sometimes conservative decisions, but it was the right decision to give yourself enough margin to cover off those dangerous times. The financial crisis was terrible. When that happened, we were right in the middle of about to close some of our biggest deals ever with this new platform. And every sales cycle that I had, my top 5 went into somebody's drawer. And I'm talking end stage contracts, end-stage contracts. And, you call and you get ghosted for a good week or two because they're trying to dig out of the rubble, and the phone dies, and that doesn't feel good. And when it's sitting in someone's drawer waiting for some financial good news out in the marketplace, it's completely out of your control. And so, much like in 2001 when 9/11 happened, same thing during the Lehman Brothers financial crisis, we headed and worked on helping our existing customers, right? So there was helping one customer, helping our existing customers. What problems you need? How can we be an asset to you in this time? Because we don't have projects to work on because people aren't buying software. Funny sales story. So our largest customer, I was dealing with their CFO, and I was sitting there trying to figure out when they're going to take my contract out of the drawer. And I know physically it's in their drawer. I was told that specifically by them. They said, "Chris, I have your contract. It's sitting in my drawer." And once things started to settle, once the stock market recovered, once things looked like the Fed did what they did and things were stabilizing, I just sent an email and I said, to this person, her name is Grace. And I said, "Grace, I poked my head out of the bunker and I thought I saw some green shoots. I don't know what your bunker looks like, but are you seeing anything looks like green shoots out there?" And I just got this ha ha ha. And she said, "I'll sign your contract."
Oh,
Because they were seeing that the industry was getting better. But leveraging and our customers through that process, doing additional consulting agreements, what we needed to do to add value and having the relationship with our customers was really key. So the Lehman Brothers one was a real tough one, and COVID. Everyone has their COVID story, but we had built our company to be virtual long ago, because Southern California is not. I don't know if you know this, Todd, but Southern California is not the cheapest place
yeah.
to have people live
Yes.
and work. And so when you have people with families and having them relocate to a place that doubles their cost of living, isn't super popular. And so we virtualized our company, a long time before COVID, and everything was cloud based. And we, in our corporate engine room, we didn't even have a server.
Wow.
And that allowed us to be built for COVID. But once again, COVID added a whole new slew of challenges. It was great for accounts receivable automation, I can tell you, because accounts receivable as an asset is the customer relationship dramatically changed. Things that which customers were going to go bankrupt, which customers were going to succeed in certain verticals. The government shut down everyone's business, so all their customers were at risk, and so accounts receivable just exploded as a result of COVID because of all the risk now that was happening in the C-suite
Oh
with
wow.
respect to accounts receivable.
And then so your business you picked up, or interest in squeezing down AR, obviously picked up at that point in time.
Yeah, we had an uptick in business, and and this gets into the industry in general. So over the course of our life cycle, competitors came in and left, depending, but many more competitors came into our space as it started to mature. And then right after Y2K, there was definitely an influx of new product and new competition in the space. Gartner, in 2000, was it 22, started covering the space. Talk about a validator when coming out of a garage and uh, being basically an off the flip chart entrepreneur, and then talking to Gartner people was sort of a moment.
Yeah.
But COVID was a challenge for everyone, but in accounts receivable, it was a big deal.
So it sounds like you got to know when to push on the accelerator and then also the brake. And sometimes it's not about sales because it's just not there because people are not ready or able. And then you got to find other things to work on and take care of what you already have and
Yeah.
retain the ones you have.
Well, over 20 years, how people acquire software, that whole process changed tremendously.
Mhm.
We can spend hours just speaking about that. So just have to. I think at the end of the day, you want to be as nimble as you can and be adaptive to the situation on the ground. We're not the size of Google, so we didn't have that kind of inertia, and we could be nimble and we could adjust our course as the industry needed us to and our customers needed us to, and that was uh, extremely helpful for us in terms of our competitive advantage and our ability to yeah navigate these really turbulent waters.
So in terms of the payment industry in general, there hasn't, been a whole lot of advancements in how we pay each other. ACH and checks are still a thing. What do you have your eye on in the industry, or what should we be thinking about as we get a little bit better at paying each other money? Do we still have to wait 3 days for a check to clear? Is that something we can help, or what's going on in that world?
That's a great question, and I think the the let's just say the way I think about it is let's talk about B2C, business to or B2B collections, I should say, business to business. Not all businesses are created equal. You have your smaller distributors, smaller mom and pops, then you have your Fortune 500, Fortune 2000. And the trading relationships between partners differs based on the size of the business, just the nature of it. And the technology used in those trading companies has changed. So, for example, when you look at large corporates, your Fortune 500s, your Fortune 2000s, they tend now to work through payment portals where they have the technology to interface with their vendors, and they're going to use that technology to minimize their cost in the AP world. And they force everyone to work through their technology. As a vendor, you got to support that. And so if you look at your typical company, certainly of our customers, 80% of the revenue came in it was generated from 20% of the customers. So 20% generated the vast majority of the revenue. That 20% is managed differently than the 80%, which 80% of just your customer numbers, which are your smaller customers. And Todd, to your point, the smaller customers are the ones that are using checks, the ones using ACH, and those are the ones that cost companies the most money to chase because there's just a lot of them.
Mhm.
And so reducing the cost associated with chasing that lower value customer, the smaller customer, is really part of this whole payments process. And you're going to see over time, obviously, the elimination of ACH and checks, and then going to e-payments, payment portals, and then the payment portal companies themselves, right? Like an Ariba, they're scaling down market because as they've covered off their largest, right, they're going to continue to scale down and try to automate AP departments of progressively smaller and smaller companies. And so you're seeing really a squeeze going on where the technology is being used by different vendors to try to reduce costs and that whole financial supply chain. So things like, we talked a little bit about Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does Bitcoin fit into this? In a corporate environment, I'm not personally, I didn't see that when I was there. Blockchain sounds great, but companies need to have a distributed ledger in a B2B world, and security is a big part of that, obviously. And cybersecurity is first and foremost in everyone's mind. And how do companies manage their largest asset or second largest asset on a balance sheet in a secure way? So there's certain technologies that sound great, but I just have yet to see them get manifested. But the idea of a 3-day check is pretty barbaric if you think about it.
Right.
And it's just the United States that has that
Yeah.
that process, right?
Well, it's if you can hold the money for a couple of days and just make a little bit on the float, that's a heck of a business model. But at some point, somebody's got to figure out a way to swap value instantly or near instantly in a reliable, secure way, right?
Yeah, 100%. And security is a big deal, right? And part of the way that we automated that payment lifecycle. So if you look at our footprint, and we really haven't talked about this, but in the state of the industry, CForia started as a credit collections company, a company that automated accounts receivable and basically communicated with trading partners, between trading partners electronically to spur payment and reduce the friction associated with the payment. As a part of that, there's a number of different links in that chain, cash application automation. Another one, our payment portals. Smaller companies that are mom and pop shops that, let's face it, represent the vast majority of companies in the United States, not in terms of size of company, but in terms of numbers of companies. And they operate on their personal world, that we have payment portals, we go out to our banks, we pay online. It would never even occur to us really to write a check anymore in our personal lives. But here we are in a B2B world where I'm paying my vendors with a check. And so there's an expectation now from your smaller companies, the ones that are right, in that squeeze point, that they want to pay using the technologies they use in their personal lives. And so payment portals and streamlining how credit card payments and how digital payments are done is a big part of that. And that's part of the really the holy grail of automation, is really making that as frictionless as possible. And that was one of the things that we did in terms of our product suite, is that we had different tools so that we can touch our customer electronically. That customer can log on and pay online and take care of their account electronically, and then you don't need people in that mix. And you're going to see that going forward, is just the elimination of people that are doing these types of tasks.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of going back to your corporate life cycle, 20 years is a long time. You and Dave seem to have great relationship and still talk to each other, and go out and have dinner together. So at what point do you decide, let's look at selling the company? Maybe walk us through that decision making process, and then what advice would you give to the next folks that are coming along that are thinking through that math of, is it, hey, seems a little frothy here, let's get out at the top of the cycle, or is it, I'm really sick of doing this, I want to go do something else, or what's the calculus there?
Another great question. When Dave and I went through our as we're going through our journey, right? And you're looking at the marketplace, and you're looking at the requirements out there, and you look at our current model of how we're funded, and you look at, there was tremendous consolidation happening in our marketplace, where the way that our market grew up is people in these various niches, whether it's cash app automation, vendor portal automation, billing automation, they started to buy other companies and really create kind of an end-to-end ERP suite of an end-to-end payment automation format. And CForia was definitely, we were going down that path to build out that functionality. But we got to a point where when we looked around in the marketplace, and we were the last privately funded company out there,
Mhm.
starts feeling a little lonely, to be honest
Yeah,
with you. And
for sure.
so we looked at our journey. We said, well, if the others are doing this, then maybe we need to be open to growing our business in a different way. And so, having done this for 20 years as an entrepreneur and looking at things like liquidity events and what was the next best step for our company, we made the decision in 2019 to put our business out for sale and find either a strategic partner that's in our industry to work with and acquire us, or private equity. And so we went through that process. I don't think it was that difficult to decide, like a difficult decision in theory to do that. The mechanics of it are extremely arduous, and I've got a whole a whole
Yeah.
slew of do's and don'ts and things along that nature. But the decision to do that was pretty straightforward. We said we need to do this, and
Mhm.
then the mechanics from that moment to the moment that we signed with our acquirer, uh, there was a lot of work that was done.
And then you sold, and then so now you're on the other side of that, and congratulations, you're successful, and the name of your company, CForia, is now been sold off to another yet larger
Yes.
organization. So your name and your company's name have been synonymous for so long. How does that, there's a lot of mixed emotions in there, right? So I've kind of gone through that merry-go-round as well. How are you? How are you holding up? What's next? You got to take a minute to say that was awesome. I enjoyed the ride. Yay, team. Now what's next? So what kind of walk us through that cycle of emotions, or where are you in that journey right now?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And when you're in the barrel and you're working every day and tasking every day, solving problems, growing the business, heads down, I never really took any time to look down. I always said, Sisyphus didn't look down, he looks up, right? An entrepreneur pushes the ball uphill, and you think, oh, once I get to this point, I'll be able to roll the ball downhill. Well, several things are always going to be true. Spoiler alert: you never reach the top of that hill. You're going to continue to learn and grow and expand. That's what entrepreneurs do. We never got to a place where like, oh, we have enough function, we're just gonna, sit on our laurels. Maybe some do. I certainly did not have that built into with me, and I learned a lot on that journey. Just to kind of circle back to an earlier question. There's things that knowing what I know now, I would say arguably I have learned more in the last 4 years than I did in the previous 20.
Mhm.
Just in terms of seeing other people run the business, what that looks like, different perspectives, what's the best way to do it. I know that's, we did it the way we did. If, 2020 hindsight's a cruel tool, but what would you do different, right? That's tougher for me, really than anything, is that 2020 hindsight tool.
Mhm.
As far as the state of the company and where does my ego play into that, and where does that sit in the journey? um, I'm totally at peace with the outcome in
Mhm.
terms of how things are today and what that looks like, because nothing ever is guaranteed. I mean, if you look in tech, especially if you've been around a minute, which you have,
Mhm.
this is just the nature of technology. Things, nothing is going to be 100 years from now, right? It's just the nature of it. So live in the minute, be in the minute, really revel in the success as the successes happen, and enjoy that. But don't cling to it, because if you cling to it, then you're not looking forward. And that's the way I look at it. So everything for me is looking forward and taking what I've learned and putting it in the next phase of my life, because I've learned a lot.
So for me, as I've gotten older, one of the hard lessons is in tech, right? Is everything's a project. and the projects are ever quicker cycles. And you know, you tend to want to build something and then build on top of that and build on top of that. And that's not, tech is this relentless drive to tear down and make it better, and tear down again and make it better. And
Yeah,
then
100%.
it's a hard thing to kind of get your head around. But then once you figure out, hey man, there's waves here, why aren't we surfing? And then you surf the wave, and then you figure it out, and then have a good time. And then at some point there's a natural part where that wave is not going to be as useful anymore. So get off and then go find the next wave. And either that's the same company and you just kind of have to reinvent, or maybe it's a different company, or maybe it's a different industry. You feel like that's true, or are we getting older, or is it technology getting more and more frequent waves where it's hard to stay on one for a while?
Boy, it's fun, right? It's super fun thinking about these things. It's super fun. We had the opportunity, when I look back through our cycle and our journey, we had hit the wall in several different places, right? So our first iteration of our technology hit a wall. We said, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to rest on our laurels? Are we going to surf? Are we going to just make this a lifestyle company and not worry about it? Or are we going to re-platform and expand what we're doing and go after larger and bigger companies and business, and keep expanding? And we did that twice in our journey. So first and foremost, when you're looking at that wall and you're seeing the market forces and you're seeing that they're not aligning with what you would love to have happen, right? Then you have to make decisions. And so having gone through two of those and being successful and wildly successful in both of those journeys is just builds the muscles required to do it again, right? And it's interesting. I've had multiple ideas for companies. I've had people call me in the last couple of years, especially in the last year. They're like, "Hey, I got this idea, or I want to do this, or I want to do that," and I really boil it down to some very fundamental principles. Like, I have an idea in my head for a company, and I said for a product. And to your point, how long is the life cycle of this company? CForia was 20 years and then went on to its next phase. Well, what's the life cycle that I think of this particular idea? What is it? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? How do you monetize it? How do you scale it? And I think, looking back, those are the questions today that you really have to ask yourself as an entrepreneur. Can I sell it? How do I monetize it? Can I scale it? Can I do it in a way that keep my sales down? And then at the end of the day, is there a liquidity event? Who do I sell it to? And who are they? And how much would they buy it for?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're successful in a space, which CForia was, you will get competition. People will see, and then you have to adapt. So there is no 10-year strat plan that is going to be super obvious that's going to take you down, because you have to be nimble, and forces are going to be different, especially with the technology changes that are happening now. So to your point, I don't think these are long waves, right? The speed of the business has to be a lot faster, a lot more nimble, and you have to really think about growth in a different way, right? I think that the era of the CForia growing over that period of time, I don't think there's going to be that many of those. I think it's going to be something far different, far quicker, far more nimble. And are they out there? Absolutely. But you really do want to think of all those different pieces up front.
You want to talk about private equity in general? We talk about this internally in my company as consultants. So there hasn't been a great environment to go IPO. Talk about exits. There hasn't been a huge, or I guess there's been a little bit of a slowdown in monster mega strategic acquisitions. The Microsoft, Google, Amazon of the world have kind of slowed down on what they're doing. So you look at, okay, where is the exit, right? And then so is it you merge and get a little bit of funding, or maybe even sell your whole company like you did to a private equity type operator. And we hear a lot about dry powder. The venture community hasn't been writing a whole bunch of checks like they used to. waiting for better valuations. Is private equity going to be with us for a while, or is this, you feel like it's just another cycle in the cosmos of tech? What's where are we headed with that? What opportunities are there for entrepreneurs to think about how to exit and provide liquidity?
Yeah, I think the world, when I look at my peers in my industry, certainly, private equity is alive and well in terms of the investment, and how many of the newer competitors that came in are completely funded by private equity, almost all of them.
It is.
So they're alive and well. Have things changed dramatically, obviously, with the changing of the interest rates, the cost of capital, and how software companies are valued and scored? I mean, I think that's one of the big things I think is different. 4 years ago, right? Did anyone really care about earnings, positive cash flow, EBITDA, or it was just growing your ARR? And then growing the ARR is how you were valued. And now, because of the cost of the money, now it's different, right? And we have to think about that. And nobody put out a memo that says, "Oh, we're going to value and change how we're looking at your company." I didn't see that, right? But that's alive and well. And so the world's changed tremendously, and how the companies are valued, I think, has changed. So to your point, if you're an entrepreneur in that liquidity event, I think if I look back on it, I think you really want to look at your story, what you're selling and how you're selling it, and who's going to buy it and why they're going to buy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately they're doing it because they want to make money, right? They want to scale the business. They want to increase the revenue to their customers, and they're right. So I don't think private equity is going anywhere. But I do think the way that they're looking at businesses has changed tremendously, and it really should inform the entrepreneur on how they run their business to make it more appealing if they want to have a liquidity event. Because you're right, there's only a finite number of exits that you can do.
So it's almost like we're coming all the way back around to build a solid company that throws off cash, and you'll have a lot of options. Dividends are hot again, almost. Back to where we all started.
As I like to say, in 2024, the model of CForia in terms of being positive cash flow, it's like an old concert T-shirt, right? It comes back into style, right? Once they regroup and they go back out on tour.
We never left.
Yeah, we never left. But the fundamentals of a business in terms of how you grow and what the exit is, as I said earlier. If I was to start a company, the first thing I look at is what do I need to do to exit and have that liquidity event, and then work backwards from there. Things that I would say to someone who's looking at private equity is have your books and finances in order. As a software company, the way that we were doing our accounting, how we did it, and how we did our contracts, and all sorts of things. Not that we made a terrible decision, right? But we weren't we didn't have the hygiene and the financial side of our house to the point where someone that can come in and want to take a look at that book at that level of scrutiny, right? You think that your books are in order, but there's a whole nother level when it comes to someone buying your business, right? And what they're expecting. And, you don't know what you don't know. And so doing that up front would just save you tremendous amounts of stress and make things a lot better and a lot easier in the whole process. So, have your books in order, have your contracts sorted out, have everything put together in a way that a third party can come through a data room and not have to ask 400 questions, right?
Right.
The cleaner, the better the hygiene, the better the experience.
Well, so you've had a hell of a ride, and you've probably traveled all over the world to some amazing places. We're in the Sky Lounge here. What, you got any great travel stories about getting out there in the world and doing some business?
Well, I looked the other day, and I've got about 2 million miles on United, and I've got just north of 1,000 lifetime Marriott nights. So I don't know whether that's
Time to take a vacation.
That's something to be So I've been all over the planet, a whole whack of times, and I know I don't know if that's something to be proud of or a cry for help. Probably a little combination, right? But in that entrepreneurial tip of the spear, that's what it took to connect with customers, and that's what running a global company looks like.
Yeah.
But my funny story is back in the 2000 and I'm gonna come up with a number here, like 2006,
Mhm.
somewhere around there. We had just expanded into Europe. We had some European customers, and I just brought on a business partner to handle cash application for us, which is one of the uh, credit and collections adjacent functionalities. And they were based in Ireland, still are actually. And we were at a JD Edwards trade show in Twickenham, England, which is just North London, and for the rugby, the English rugby team, national team place. It's a weird place for a trade show. So we're at this JD Edwards conference. It's a niche local conference, and we're on our way back. And there's no one in our space there, right? It's an ERP conference. There's nobody in our space. It was early days, and the taxi driver was taking us back to the hotel, Heathrow Marriott, and I said, "Hey, is there a place we can go eat around here? Because I absolutely hate English food. Sorry if, to all the Brits on the phone, but just but I'm an Indian food guy. I said, do you have any good Indian place?" He goes, "Oh, this place called Zayani. It's right off the Bath Road. You'll love it." So we went there, and the place was packed, brand new. Place was packed. There was one table in the corner, and so myself, this business associate of mine, and his sales rep, who was about 24 years old, just young kid, we go and sit in the corner, and there's this table of four Americans sitting next to us, and they were having a good time. I'll just say that, and they were celebrating something, and you can tell from the accents they're having a really good time. And the word ties, right? Ties, and they look like software guys, and so the sales rep looks at me and goes, "Hey, you guys look like you're software guys, right?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, yeah, we're software guys." And he said, "Oh, where are you from?" And they're like, "Oh, we're from New Jersey." And he goes, "Oh, Jersey guys, we're in New Jersey." He goes, "Parsippany," and I go, so these little tumblers are going into my head. And when they said Parsippany, I was like, "That's the headquarters that get paid, right?" And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no."
Oh no.
And then he said, "Oh, okay, well, we're software guys." He goes, "Well, what software?" And I said, "My biggest competitor is from Parsippany, New Jersey." And the guy said, "Well, who is that?" I said, "It's Get Paid." And that table went silent. And the guy, one of the people there, looked at me and he said, "We're the top four people that get paid." Now,
Okay.
what are the odds, right? And
Yeah.
we're not in a trade show in Atlanta. We are in, some Indian restaurant outside of Heathrow. And then he looks at me and goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm the CEO, Chris Caparon, the CEO of Sephoria." And they burst out laughing because I thought I was pulling their chain, and they thought I was laughing. Like if I was going to make a joke and put the boogeyman in front of them,
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh." So then I gave them my business card, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is awkward." And I mean, we were passionate competitors.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we got out of there real quick. I went back to eat the next day, and the waiter was sitting there, and he said, "Oh man, they were just talking about you guys and how tough a competitor you were." So you
That's
never
awesome.
know who you're going to sit next to, and you meet at the bar. You
Yeah.
just never know. But I met my biggest competitor there, and what a weird small world story. So that's
Wow.
my travel story.
That's awesome. Well, it's been great having you in the Sky Lounge, spending a few minutes with you. How can people get in touch with you on the internet if they would like to follow up with you after this?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Todd. I'm on LinkedIn like everyone else. Chris Caparon, Caparon, or search on Sephoria. You'll run into me, and just reach out. I'm really interested in taking what I have learned and putting it into a very focused way and helping companies move forward and still have a burning passion for solving customer problems. And in retirement, Todd, I've done every honeydew in the house, and my wife appreciates it. But when you've lived your life hunting mastodon, it you find that you really enjoy it. And I've always, yeah, you can tell, I always love work. It was a work of love and passion, and look forward to the next chapter in my life.
I wish you failure in retirement. I know your next opportunity is just around the corner, and you're gonna find something huge to work on. So goodbye for now.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us in the Sky Lounge. Please like and subscribe to hear more from Tales from the Sky Lounge here and anywhere else you get your podcasts.